You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 513.
Hello and welcome back to the longest running outdoors podcast in the world here on the outdoorstation.co.uk. I'm your host, Bob Cartwright, and I'm sorry to say, I've got a cold. But the show must go on. A recent social media post of mine reminded me the other day just how supportive of my 15-year production history you guys are. I've had loads of you make suggestions when you've signed up for the newsletter on the outdoorstation.co.uk website, and I'm going to do an update podcast soon, thanking you all by name and also discussing some of your comments. However, let's get back to this particular podcast, which is the second part of my interview with Nikki Ray regarding her 9-month ready, steady, slow cycle trip through 13 countries to Ghana on a bike she built herself. In part 1, we established her reason for the trip and some of her experiences travelling as a solo female, particularly in the Atlas Mountains. In this episode, we explore this further, talk about other cyclists she met along the way, and consider the cultural differences when knocking on a totally random door for help, and then being invited in as a stranger into someone's home to sleep the night. I asked her how she felt the first time she knocked on a door in Morocco.
So actually I struck a little bit of luck. I was cycling along one day and I went up this big hill and I said, okay, I want to turn around now because I think there's going to be a really nice view. So I turned around, took my picture, and then I'm looking at the picture and thinking, is that someone on a bicycle? And so I met this French cycle tourist, and he'd been the first person I'd seen cycle touring up until that point. Maybe I'd seen a couple of people in Spain, but they were going in the other direction. So we stopped, so we cycled together that day and the day afterwards. So the first time I actually knocked on a door was with him, which actually gave that little bit of like, I don't know, I felt like more secure, I guess. But the problem was because he spoke French, obviously not everybody in Morocco speaks French. You only speak French if you've been to school. So he was trying to explain lots of stuff in French, like, no, we can put our tents outside, which kind of confused the situation. I found that when I was by myself, it was much more simple. And also it was a little bit awkward because they just assumed that we were married. And I was like, actually, no, we've met yesterday or whatever. And I thought, maybe from their perspective, it was reflecting badly on me. Like, obviously, it's never going to reflect badly on him, is it? But so then, yeah, I just preferred when I was by myself after that. But it was nice to have that first experience with him. They did in the end invite us inside, and we slept in their living room, and they brought us even pajamas. Actually, they offered me pajamas, which I said, I'm okay, I've got my own. So yeah, but the first time after that I knocked on the door by myself, because I think I went to Rabat to get the visa for Mauritania, and then it was after that. And I'd been cycling for ages, and I just kept pushing on, going, no, this isn't the place, this isn't the place. So in the end, there was only one tiny house in the middle of nowhere, and there was about 6 women and girls living there. So I had to kind of go onto their land and look for them and kind of wave awkwardly into the distance and wait for about 2 minutes as they walked from the field towards me. But they were really lovely. But yeah, that night we just communicated with sign language because we didn't have a common language. But I was sitting there thinking, no one knows I'm here, but everybody is just so, I don't know, you get a sense of somebody. I don't know if you feel the same, but every time I go traveling, within about 5 seconds, I have a sense of how the person's going to be. You either get a really bad feeling or you get a good feeling. So there's always that kind of margin of time to be actually, I'm going to go. And that didn't happen to me on my trip.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, actually, when we came back from our travels, and we felt in conclusion that actually a couple of things: people with the least give the most, when you meet somebody on the road, generally you're both sort of naked, as in the sense that you're not surrounded by your car and your clothes and your social friends and your aspiring watches or whatever it may be. So you tend to find very, very quickly a level path with the people. And even before you've met them sometimes, I have always had the feeling that you'd either be friends for life or you just walk past and just give them a nod. Somehow there was some body culture that goes on. But the thing that I noted in your blog, which you said, which is I thought very interesting and very, very true, is travel honestly and treat everyone as an equal. It's a privilege to do something that many people you meet actually on the road will never be able to do.
Yeah, definitely. And actually something that did make me quite upset, because I visited different bike projects and I did meet quite a lot of young boys that really wanted to do the same thing as me. And there was actually one guy in Sierra Leone that he was really honestly asking, can I come with you? He was 16. And so the first time I laughed, but he's like, don't laugh at me, I'm being serious, I want to come with you. And that was one of the most difficult conversations I've had in my life, because I couldn't explain all the different levels of why he couldn't come with me. Like, he's technically a child. Like, I can't cycle along with a child that I haven't met. He didn't have somewhere to live, all of these different things. He also didn't have an ID card or a passport. So obviously then we'd get to a point where he couldn't carry on any longer. But yes, it's true. Like for the majority of people, they're not able to do that. And I heard and witnessed different stories of different people traveling in different ways. And I always made a point of, when I was cycling along, to say hi or wave at people that were on the same level as me. So I would say people on bicycles or pedestrians, not obviously at cars, because they're on another level. They don't understand. But pedestrians and bicycles, I would always greet everybody that I saw on the road. And it was funny because obviously on the countryside, most people, they're either scared, which is totally understandable, or they are like wave back and are really happy. But then when you get into the town, I would always forget that the mentality changes so quickly. So I'd keep waving and greeting people, and they would just look at me like, are you insane? Why are you greeting me? And it's the same like in cities and towns in the UK. Like, people don't smile and talk to each other very often. Well, at least in London. Obviously, other parts of the country might be different.
Well, it's like talking to people on the tube in London. It's, are you about to stab me? No, I just want to say it's a nice day, isn't it?
It does happen sometimes, but not so often.
But you had a case, I noticed, really, that reinforces the story you was telling about the well, I call him the Great White Hunter, but you called him the Great White Traveller on a bicycle, which is the other type of traveller that you meet doing what you were doing, but at a different level, and obviously having a completely different experience.
Definitely. So it was a really frustrating situation. It just went on forever because I heard about him for days. He was like a few hours ahead of me in Liberia. So every time I was talking to people, they were saying, oh, your friend's ahead. I'm like, this person's not my friend. I don't know who they are. And especially when I met them, I was like, they're definitely not my friend. But one particular conversation I remember is, so there's these huge fruit stalls on the side of the road. So I stopped to buy some fruit, and the same conversation happens. Oh, your friend's ahead. And I said, oh, no, I don't know who he is. And the woman said, yeah, he was going so fast, like head down, not greeting anybody. And so I just had this image in my head of how this person is traveling, which is really a shame. And it goes back to the name of my blog, like Ready, Steady, Slow, to take time and to stop. And obviously I didn't stop every single time somebody wanted to have a conversation with me. But if I'd stopped to buy something, of course, like I would take time to talk with the person that was selling the fruit, and anyone that might have like popped along in the time being. Sometimes actually, I remember I was buying, in quite a lot of countries they sell like frozen yogurt, which is amazing, out of like a little portable ice cream movable cart. And so maybe it was in Guinea. It was the first time I'd seen one of these ice cream things. I knew they existed in Ghana. So I stopped, and actually the guy was from Sierra Leone, which meant that he spoke English. So I was talking to him, and then I look up from our conversation and I realised that there's about 20 people standing around us, which was quite hilarious. But then I had little conversations with some of them as well. I just think it's like, I feel it just makes me really uncomfortable, especially this man, he was French. And so in West Africa, France colonised a lot of the countries, and I'm British, and Britain colonised West African countries as well. So kind of just going through and just not interacting with anybody seems like extremely wrong.
You met a couple of other travellers doing the same type of thing as yourself. You mentioned a French guy, but also I noticed English Ben pops up in Sahara.
English Ben, yes.
Did you find in the conversations with other people doing it at the same level as yourself, sort of thing, that the guys were getting as much hospitality being offered to them as you had?
Yeah, I think so. So with the French guy, he'd been knocking on people's doors in Morocco and having, I think, a similar experience to me, although he said that he camped outside more often. So that may have been a gender thing, that because women were opening the door, they were more likely to invite me in and to feel safe to have me inside, possibly. Ben, it's hilarious. He was cycling for 2 weeks during his university holidays, and he was really ill prepared. I met him in Western Sahara, and he had 3 litres of water. And I was like, okay, I think you might need to change that. But he ended up getting really ill because he drank from a tap in Mauritania. And I was saying to him, don't wild camp. Well, you can wild camp, but camp where people know where you are. Try and connect with people and camp next to them, because then you can also get drinkable water, which evidently I don't think he did. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been filling his water bottle up. So in the end, he got ill. So actually, this whole camping near people for safety, but also in my experience, it often equals safe water as well. And then obviously you're connecting with people, so it's kind of like a triple whammy, which I think possibly meant that I didn't have problems that potentially other people might have had.
Again, coming back to the couch surfing and hot showers, what sort of proportion of the trip do you feel that you spent sort of being hosted by people using that system as opposed to either wild camping or knocking on doors?
Quite a small percentage. So basically once every country, essentially, because it would be when I was in the capital city.
Okay, as little as that.
Yeah, because when I would stop in the capital city to get the visa for the next country.
But at least, presumably, the network was very supportive of what you were doing, because I understand you obviously had an accident. I can't remember where it was now, but you had an accident with a taxi, which we'll come on to in a second. Yeah. And it was good to have somebody that was sort of able to put you up for a few days while you started to recover.
Oh, I stayed with this one man called Julian in Dakar. I stayed in the end with him for about 2 weeks. He was so kind. Because I actually was staying with a couple before, and I sensed that they just wanted me to stay for 2 days and then leave, even though that they knew that I was really injured, and they lived on the 3rd floor, and I was I actually couldn't leave their flat really, because it would hurt so much to go down the stairs and then come back up again. So in the end I contacted this other guy, and I'm so glad that I did, because he just completely understood, and he said just rest for as long as it takes.
Did you feel obligated to compensate him in any way?
No, I mean, I kept trying to buy him coffee, because he really liked this particular coffee that I couldn't find, and chocolate, and buying him food, and he was really adamant. Actually, I managed to buy him a beer at a bar once, but he was absolutely not, and being really strict about this, which I found quite difficult, because I was well, the problem is I'm in your house and I'm eating all of your food. He was French, and I'm assuming he had quite a good salary because of the job that he had. But I ended up writing this song about that period in time, because I was quite sad, and I was okay, let's try and write a comedy song. And one of the lines is I'm eating all of Julian's food, oh how very rude, because that's exactly how I felt. But he just day after day kept saying, stop it, Nikki, it's fine.
Did you feel like you should or wanted to compensate any of the people that you stayed with on the sort of random knocking on doors?
So it's a really difficult one. In hindsight, I actually wish that I had. I think giving money, people might have been offended, but I wish that I'd given more things, or a kind of a swap of food or something of that nature. But it's a tricky one, because even though I was knocking on their door, especially in Morocco, there's this tradition of to host people in a very specific, you can see, because it's the same with each person, in a very structured way. So I think to try and add money to that, I think I would have offended them. But in hindsight, I wish I'd just tried, or maybe hid money somewhere, especially with certain houses. That was one of my regrets. Certain places that I stayed, I was I really should have. Yeah, so maybe that would be a strategy for next time, actually, to not specifically give money, but hide it somewhere, or do some other sort of exchange.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cultural imperative, I think, to look after strangers on the road, especially in rural areas, in places like Morocco, and it's something that well, obviously you were thankful for. The other thing that struck me from your blog was the fact that every now and again you could let rip and rock them out with your ukulele that you took with you.
Yeah, that was quite awkward actually, because so as I'm sure many people are aware, like West Africa has a really great music tradition, and most of this, so I play the ukulele and I sing, but the kind of my favourite genre of song is like quite a slow ballad. So often I'd play for people, or they'd spot it, think it was a guitar. I'd say, no, it's a ukulele, let me show you. And they'd say, oh, please play. So I'd play. And they'd be like trying to dance to it, but obviously like it was just too slow. And I was like, oh, goodness me, I should have learned some more upbeat songs. But yeah, it was really nice. It was nice to be able to share something else with people. And certain places I stayed, like in Gambia, I stayed with a man who started up a cycling club, and he had 2 little boys, and so I let them like have a little go on the ukulele, but then they dropped it on the floor, so I was like, okay, playtime's over, give back the ukulele. But I'm really glad that I brought it around with me, even though I didn't end up playing it as much as I thought I would. But I think I would have missed it if I didn't have it.
Well, it's a great icebreaker, isn't it? Just perhaps you just need to get some more stereophonics for the ukulele music sorted to rock it out a bit. Let's talk about a few practical things. I did mention in the introduction that you'd actually built this bike yourself as part of the project work that you're doing. Would you just like to give people a rough idea of what the bike cost and how it all came together?
Yeah, so I think in the end, it probably only cost me about £200. I was inspired by my friend Jo, who she decided that she wanted to build herself a bike. So she contacted a bike shop, found a nice mechanic person who helped her to put her bike together. And so I also have lots of friends who are mechanics and access to different kind of second-hand parts because of mechanic friends and because of the bike project that I work for. So I ended up doing a swap of the bicycle, the hybrid bike that I was riding, for a frame. So I swapped it I specifically wanted a purple frame. I didn't think I was going to find one in the end. So a purple steel frame from Trek, probably from about the 90s. And so then I acquired 2 different wheels by different manufacturers. And various friends gave me the stem, the handlebars, the grips, the seat post and saddle. Actually no, I'd had them from the previous bike, I think. So basically the bits that were new were like the cassette and the chain and the crank arms. Actually not that much of it was new, but like crucial parts. Even the tyres actually were ever so slightly used. And I just thought this would kind of be... I'd never built a bike before. Like, I have a relatively good knowledge of mechanics, but I'd never built a bike myself. So I wanted to do that, and I was like, to build my own bike from recycled parts and then cycle it to Ghana, that'll be a cool thing. And from now onwards, all the future touring I do, it will be on this bike. I've changed one of the wheels already because the back wheel, I broke about 8 different spokes on it, and it just, it's seen the end of its days. So I replaced it with another second-hand wheel of the same make. That's what I did.
If you have any feedback, questions or suggestions, why not drop us a line either on Facebook or directly to our email address, info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
The home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.
Well, let's just actually go on to talk about gear in a bit. I know that you had the traditional aluminium racks and one failed, as they tend to do over a period of time. And certainly, if you're looking at the pictures, it looks like your back pannier was absolutely loaded to the hilt. while you were doing some of this. But let's just talk about other bits of practicalities. Now, the mapping, a lot of people would be very anal these days and have GPS systems coming out their ears, particularly with doing something like this and doing an immense amount of research. From what you mentioned earlier on in our conversation, you said obviously you went into Morocco and went, right, now where am I going? So how did it work for you? What was your system that you found the most reliable for travelling from, well, Gibraltar all the way down to the bottom of Africa?
Yeah, I don't have any of this GPS shenanigans, and the reason why I know how far I cycled was because each day I knew how many kilometres I cycled, and then I just added it up at the end rather than having like a tracked route. So I just used a free map thing called wait a minute, which one did I use? Osmond on my phone. I had a solar panel so I could keep my phone charged, but that in the end broke. But luckily after the desert, so I got good use out of it through the desert. And I did have a paper map, but it was a road map, and because all of the countries in West Africa are really small, it was kind of quite hard to see exactly where you would be going. But navigating in West Africa compared to England, for example, is significantly easier because there's less options of roads to choose. Sometimes there's only one. So it's basically, and your choice is often, do I want to go on the main road that's paved, or do I want to go on a smaller road that will be less busy but will be unpaved? So after a few countries, each country you could kind of tell the quality of the roads, and you could kind of make this judgment. Yeah, so basically I navigated with my phone kind of day to day.
So I'm presuming you used Google Earth or whatever to have a rough idea of what the train was going to be like or what the road looked like and with what the destination would have been. But I'm guessing as well...
Oh, no, I didn't do that.
No?
No, I didn't look from like satellite views. Sometimes I did like a few minutes before I was going to stop if I wasn't really sure if there were going to be houses that I could ask to sleep at. That would be the reason why I'd look on a satellite view. I did that in Morocco, but I think sometimes maybe the internet signal wasn't that strong.
I was going to say you had a good enough signal to allow that to happen.
There was actually good internet signal in most of the countries, which just did surprise me. Liberia, there wasn't good signal, and I didn't get a SIM card in Mauritania. But yeah, there was always enough internet to send like WhatsApp messages and stuff. But yeah, I didn't really see the point of having a look on like Google Earth of what something was going to look like before I got there. I mean, I knew when it was going to be mountainous, like when I went over the mountains. Sometimes I did have a bit of a surprise, like after the Anti-Atlas Mountains, I went to the beach and I didn't realise there was like a giant kind of mini mountain to go over to get to the beach. That was surprising, but...
And I presume you use the phone as the whole communications method for booking or contacting people on couch surfing and hot showers?
Yeah.
So would you, looking back on it then, could you have done the trip? Would it have been possible if you hadn't taken any phone or any tech with you?
I mean, it would have done. So I didn't have a particularly good phone, but I used it for contacting people at home, for a camera. So I didn't bring a camera, and for navigating. So I think because I was using it as a kind of 3-in-1, when it did break, I did wait around and get it fixed. But I think it was more because of the photos. Like I didn't want to miss out. I knew that I'd be able to navigate without it, but I didn't want to miss out on taking photos.
And what about other things? You mentioned the situation with English Ben there getting sick. What about water purification? Because I'm assuming they're not, obviously, the area you're going through hasn't got copious amounts of water. So did you just totally rely on trust that the water that you were buying or people were giving to you was potable water, or did you take a filter system to be doubly sure?
So I did have a filter system. I drank any water until Western Sahara, basically. I think I filtered water in Mauritania. You know what? Actually, no. In the desert, I drank water that people gave me because it's the desert and it's only going to be possible that it comes from a well, which is so far down in the ground. Because the problem we have is if it's a well in an urban area where lots of people are living close to that, then that well's not going to be safe. But if it's in the middle of the desert, it's going to be fine. And then from boreholes, so where there's a big kind of lever and that's being pulled out of the ground from quite low down. But from Senegal, in Gambia they don't have this, but in Senegal and most of the other countries they have purified water sachets, which is quite hard to explain. But imagine like a a bag of water basically sealed, and it has writing on it. So those I would assume like are perfectly fine. In Gambia, they don't have that, so they just have water in little bags tied up, so you can tell that that's not necessarily going to be safe. So I started like buying water from Senegal in these sachets, which people sell on the roadside, and often because in the morning they're chilled, and when they're restocking, they've come out of a freezer, so they're cold, which is really nice actually.
Well, I bet that was rewarding after a few hours cycling in 40 degrees.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming back to gear again as well, just touching on that a bit more, I presume that you took, from the volume I can see on the pictures, you took a tent, a sleeping bag, a change of clothes, and probably that was about it, I would guess. Would be a reasonable description?
I don't know. I think I had lots of stuff. The sleeping bag I had was pretty huge. I think in the future I'd probably try and buy one that could pack down a bit more. I ditched some of my clothes because I had winter clothes for the mountains, which then I didn't need. I had quite a few changes of clothes. I can't really think now what I had, to be honest. I had like a little stove, which I honestly didn't really use very often. I had like a mini little pillow and a fold down mat, which was incredibly uncomfortable, especially when sleeping on concrete. So I probably wouldn't, well, now I left it in Ghana, but I wouldn't buy that mat necessarily again. Had like a paper map. I think I had all kinds of like bits and bobs, which I probably didn't need, but did. Yeah, in the future now, I was thinking maybe I might try this whole bike packing shenanigans of like in an effort to carry less stuff. And whilst I guess it depends where you're cycling, but whilst I did really like having a tent to have more options, depending on the season and the country that you're traveling through, I think I might try and not carry a tent potentially in the future. See how that goes.
And from a practical point of view, or from a desire point of view, looking back on the experience and the trip itself, what piece of equipment do you think should be invented or adapted that would have made your whole journey more comfortable, I suppose is a good word, but not the ideal word, more enjoyable perhaps?
A piece of equipment?
What do you think? Even if it doesn't exist, what sort of thing would be a useful item that would have actually made a difference in some way?
I don't know, really. I mean, I had a really rubbish stand. I mean, it exists already. My stand was really rubbish, so it didn't actually allow my bike to stand up properly. That might have helped me. That exists already. I'm not sure. I think I did just fine. I don't believe you need all this fancy gadgety tech stuff. No, I don't know. I think I was fine as I was.
And during the journey, which was 9 months of cycling, did you ever experience your biggest fear coming to fruition in any shape or form?
I don't think so, because I became more relaxed as the journey went on, and looking back, some of the situations I was in were like crazy. So for example, in the desert, which is mostly flat, there's usually a horrendous headwind, and there was a little bit of kind of a hilly area where the incline was really steep. There's this massive headwind. I'm cycling downhill. It's not making any difference. Obviously, when I'm cycling uphill, I feel like I'm not actually moving. And I was absolutely exhausted, so I just stop and I just start crying. I'm like, oh God, it's awful. But then like 2 minutes later, I'm like, okay, all right, let's carry on. Like huge things of, oh, I'm in the middle of nowhere. There aren't any cars passing. I just kind of picked myself up and like carried on really. I was like, okay, let's keep going. But I guess, yeah, when I hurt my knee, I've never really had a knee injury before, and I didn't appreciate how bad it was. And I thought that was the end of my trip. I just couldn't see how this knee was going to mend itself, because it did take about a month for it to mend properly. And I guess I probably wasn't resting as much as I should. But that was it. I thought, this is over. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go home because I want to arrive in Ghana. Like, I'm so close. All kinds of things were going through my head. So yeah, that was probably the moment. The
projects that you came across en route, which I presume you must have either picked up from other people as you passed through the countries, or perhaps did some research before you left, which were very similar to your project, recycling bikes, as it were, or teaching people to ride. It just shows you the power of a bicycle as a conversation piece and also a practical tool.
Oh, definitely. So before I went on the trip, I was trying to find out about different bicycle projects on the way, which wasn't that easy to find via the internet. The only one I found out was called the Village Bicycle Project, which is in Ghana and Sierra Leone, so I visited them in Sierra Leone. But along the way I found out about other ones. So there's quite a few organisations that are getting shipping containers of bicycles from the US or from Europe, shipped over to different African countries, and then they're given to often secondary school students who have to walk really far to get to school. So one particular project I visited was called YC, which is WYCE, and they're based in Gambia, and they get their bicycles sent over from recycled bicycles from the UK. And I went and talked to the project coordinator, and he's saying that, yeah, often children are walking like 6 miles one way to get to school. So they're having to wake up in the dark, walk all this way. And he's saying sometimes the students, like especially some of the girls, they get really tired. They haven't even got to school and they get too tired and they just go, you know what, that's it. I can't do this again after school, and they just go back home. So having a bicycle like speeds up their journey. It's much less energy that they're using in order to get to school. And there was lots of different projects that I visited like this along the way that I was really happy to, because it's also like the work that I'm doing in London, teaching refugee women how to ride bikes. Like, it's empowering, but it's also transport as well. And that's why the Bike Project gives bikes to refugees in London, because transport is so expensive. So they're empowered, they're able to do physical exercise, and they're also able to get places for free, which is the same as these secondary school students in Gambia, in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, the places that I visited.
Well, I'll certainly put all the links to these various projects in the show notes that obviously are available to people in the UK if they've got bikes they would like to see go to a good home and certainly make a difference to people's lives. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and it just shows you the power of the cycle and what it can do. So not only does it need to be a carbon fibre super fast thing, there are people managing quite happy to change their lives on very basic bikes, which is great to see. Now, we've had an hour of conversation. This has been wonderful, and there is so much in the 12 countries, so many stories that we could have talked about, and I sort of almost daren't dip into any one of them because they're each one's fascinating. So what I do suggest is people that listen to this, please do look up the website and read that at your leisure. It's a wonderful read, and certainly does open your eyes to the generosity and the warm welcome that you get when you meet people in the same way. But I do have a final question for you, and it may be tricky in this particular case because there's so much to talk about, but I certainly hope you have one ready for me, which is, of all the things I could have asked you about this particular trip, what should I have asked you?
What should you have asked me? Wow, that's a really difficult question, actually. What should you have asked me? I mean, there's so many, yeah, as you say, different stories that I could tell. Maybe, do I feel like I had a different experience on this trip because I was a woman traveling?
And what would your answer be? I
guess because I feel like I did. I feel like a woman traveling by herself or a man traveling by himself, because you're a solo traveler, you do have a different experience. But some of the things I experienced, like no other man, or maybe even a pair of women or a man and a woman traveling together would have experienced. It's just how like special experiences I had in the company of women. So one was in Morocco, where this family like welcomed me into their house, and the mum ends up like scrubbing me down in their hammam, their like little thing they have in the courtyard, and they dressed me up in pajamas. They like wrapped my hair in a headscarf, and they fed me and all this kind of stuff. And another one in Sierra Leone where I went swimming with a group of little girls in the river. Just I feel that often people are telling women when it's a sports activity or a long journey like this that, oh, it's dangerous, like you shouldn't go. But honestly, the things that I experienced, I think, because I was a woman traveling by myself, were wonderful beyond measure.
And what do you think has changed for you as a result of doing this?
I think definitely it was difficult to come back to London and really try and maintain this, but I'm quite a calm person anyways, but I really was in a very calm place. I let kind of things wash over me because of all the difficult experiences that I had. I had to learn not to kind of panic, and that people around the world are very kind, and I think that I really want to take on the things that I've learned from them, especially being kind to strangers and striving to be as, like, even half as kind as the people that I met along the way who had significantly less than I do. So to not get worked up about things, to stay calm and to be kind in life to everyone that you meet.
To be kind in life to everyone you meet. What a fabulous ideology to live by. And I guess I should have followed that up to see if Nikki had actually managed to do that after returning to London. However, she was kind enough to spend the evening chatting with me and sharing her story with you. Of course, all the links to everything we've discussed can be found over on the show notes, along with pictures and how to recycle your bicycle should you wish to do so. I hope it's given you confidence that travel can be rewarding and educational. I heard a lovely saying the other day, which I'm going to finish with. May we remember that in each and every moment, we are composing the story of our lives. Let's aim to make it an interesting read. And yours certainly is, Nikki. Thanks once again, and thanks to you guys for listening. Until next time, folks. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.